Good evening, everyone. Welcome to those in the audience. Welcome to those joining us online, live streaming this event on our YouTube channel. My name is John Herron. I am the Director and Chief Executive of the Kansas City Public Library. It is my great pleasure to welcome you and to thank you for joining us for a very special event this evening. Kansas City residents spend a great deal of time, perhaps too much time, debating exactly what kind of town this is. Is it a Western city? Is it a Southern city? Is it a Midwestern city? Whatever that may be. They also add to this discussion, is this an Irish town? An Italian town? Well, often overlooked in all of this, in part because we don't have the same lyrical flow to our name as our sister city to the east, Saint Louis, is that this is actually a French city. French trader influence in this region dates back to at least the 1720s, if not before. French military presence in what became Kansas City dates to the 1740s. And of course, in the 1820s, the first permanent European settlement in the city was led by Francois Choteau and his family. They established a trading fort populated by French families in this region. Next time you go to the river market, you can still see evidence of the site of that trading post. It is this French heritage that we have celebrated ever since, and we celebrate now. We are commemorating the 400th birthday of one of the greatest figures in French literature, the playwright Molière. The library is very thrilled to be a part of this celebration, and we've worked very hard to make tonight happen. We appreciated the continued collaboration of everybody in KC Moliere 400, and especially the patience of all of our guests this evening as we have scheduled and then rescheduled once again this event. This evening was originally set for mid-January, 4 days before Moliere's birthday, but the pandemic altered that. A cliche we certainly hope we can retire very soon. But we have stayed with it. KC Moliere 400 has stayed with it, and all of you have stayed with it. And this evening is the reward. We couldn't be happier to present it to all of you tonight. It is my great honor to introduce Cyprien Simkowitz, who will present our distinguished speaker tonight. Cyprien was the honorary consul of France in Kansas City from 2014 to 2019, and she's past president of Alliance Française of Kansas City. She was recently elevated from Knight, or Chevalier, to Officer of the National Order of Merit, France's second highest honor. She was one of only 6 people worldwide to receive that promotion and the only one living in the United States to do so. She also serves as chair of the International Committee of KC Moliere 400 in 2022. Cyprien, thank you so much for being here. Please welcome Cyprien to the stage.
Thank you. Good evening. Bonsoir. Thank you so much for being here and for being online as well. Before I came to the United States, I did not really know the word serendipity. But if there is a word that applies here, is certainly serendipity. I don't know how many of you know or have seen the play performed by French actor from the Comédie Française, Jérôme Pouly, this last Saturday night and Sunday afternoon. But this would not have been possible without Dean Roche-Tiengo. She was the one who introduced me to Jérôme, and this is all that happened. Dr. Virginie Roche-Tiengo is the Assistant Dean for International and Institutional Relations at the Sorbonne Paris-Nord Law School. She teaches legal English there to graduate students, and as well as in Montpellier, and also in Greece at the Institute of Francophone Studies. She, following her PhD at the Sorbonne University on Lost Unity, the Poetics of Myth in the Theatre of the Irish playwright Brian Friel, she has published on Irish and French drama, in particular the work of Brian Friel, Thomas Kilroy, Frank McGuinness, Derek Mahon, James Joyce, Lady Gregory, Samuel Beckett, or Molière. The latest international conference she co-organized in October 2018, about a century ago, was entitled Crossing Borders, Contemporary Anglophone Theatre in Europe. Virginie Roche-Tiengo is currently working on the Brian Friel papers in the National Library of Ireland and in the archives of NUI Galway as part of a new book project. She is the president of GIS Air in the Université Sorbonne Paris-Nord. GIS Air is a scientific interest group working on the Irish diaspora, democracy, and human rights. GIS Air has the support of the Irish Minister of State for the Diaspora and International Development and the Irish Embassy in France. She's also a member of GIS Sociability, creating an online encyclopedia, Digitense, on 18th century sociability, and received a scholarship to work in the National Archives of London on 18th century Irish playwrights Richard Brinsley Sheridan and Charles MacLean in July 2022. She's involved in the Molière 400 years celebration in France, and in particular in the Casey Molière 422 project in Kansas City, Missouri. Her research focuses also on law, crossing borders, and the Irish stage. She teaches especially a class at the Faculty of Law of Sorbonne Paris-Nord on theater and the law. Without further ado, she has published extensively, of course, many papers, as all the academics are wont to do. And so without further ado, I give you Dr. Virginie Roche-Tiengo.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, great. Obviously celebrating Molière 400 years today with you in Kansas City is a great honor bestowed upon me, and I really want to thank Cyprien for really from the bottom of my heart for our support, our generosity, our friendship. My heart is really bursting with gratitude for the things she's done and how she welcomed me here in Kansas City. I want to thank her husband, Jerry White, as well, for his kindness, his friendship, and his help all along this trip. Thank you so much, Jerry. Of course, I want to thank Professor Felicia Landry for our scholarly enthusiasm and boundless energy in the organization of this Molière KC 400. Thanks a million, Felicia. Obviously, I don't know if you know the French saying, behind every great woman, there is a great man. So I want to thank my husband, because without him, I wouldn't be here. So I want to thank him. He's in Paris, watching me, maybe online, but he's with me, with the spirit. So thank you, Luca, I love you, and thank you for your support and your help. And I want to say thank you to my two wonderful daughter, Mary and Chiara. Thank you as well. They're in Italy, they're grandparents, so they're following as well. So you see all around the place. So Irish roots and Italian roots, and today French, obviously. And obviously, thank you to all of you for attending here or online. Thank you so much for coming, for taking the time. It was a long journey to come here, 2 planes, but I made it. For me, it's 1 o'clock at night. It's a bit late with the time lag, but I'm a bit used to it now. But as you will discover, no dream is beyond reach with Molière in the United States of America. So let's start without further ado. So Jean-Baptiste Poquelin, Molière, was born in 1622 in the heart of Paris. I don't know if you know Paris or if you will go. So this is called le premier arrondissement, okay, the first district in Paris. And today, 400 years later, we are celebrating his birthday in the heart of America, in Kansas City. So heart of Paris, heart of America, it makes sense. As you know, Kansas City is the beating heart of the US because it is one of the greatest American cities for the arts. And we are really fortunate to attend and to celebrate Molière. So many were canceled because of COVID-19, so this is one of the greatest celebrations in the United States. So we're extremely fortunate for that. As I was saying, with Molière, everything is possible and nothing is ever enough. Molière's theater is deeply moving in its humanity because, as you know, Molière was both a playwright, a poet, and an actor. Okay, so he had three, okay, a playwright, a poet, and an actor. He wrote for the stage and for the players. And that is why maybe Molière today continues to trigger throughout the world the lost laughter of the child. Okay? The Freudian awakening of the infantile, as well as the terrified laughter of the adult. Because the adult is still looking for that freedom. When you're a child and you can laugh at what you like, this is what Molière wants to give us. Laughter is a way to transcend the human predicament. It's a way to sublimate the metaphysical questioning. Molière theater crosses linguistic and spatial border because laughter helps every human being and even urges them to communicate beyond words in secret harmony and cryptic whisperings. A Molière-esque poetry of the sense is offered to us because first and foremost, Molière's plays are to be staged and experienced, not only read, but they have to be seen by the spectator listener. In his preface to Les Précieuses Ridicules, the Conceited Lady, Molière wrote, "C'est une chose étrange qu'on imprime les gens malgré eux. A strange thing it is that people should be put in print against their will." And he adds further on, je ne vois rien de si injuste et je pardonnerai toute autre violence plutôt que celle-là. I know nothing so unfair and would pardon any other violence rather than that one. Molière's work was copied during his performances and sometimes stolen by unprincipled booksellers and publishers. One day, he even received a letter from a man who said, I've been to your play 12 times. I said, oh, great. No, I was copying the lines and I published them, so I made a money out of it. So that's why then he said, I'm going to publish myself and do it myself. And this is why maybe we have so few things written by Molière, very few holographic notes. It's extremely rare to find handwriting of Molière, as you may know. Sorry, I moved too quick there. All right. There was as well, before moving to that, there was as well, why we don't have that, there is a legend that one day, in 1820, 2 centuries ago, a man with a farmer really, driving a cart full of books and papers, arrived at the National Library and said, I have the paper of Monsieur de Molière. And there was a rude and young man and said, no, it's closed, we don't want it, come back tomorrow. But he never came back. So all the paper vanished into thin air, and this is the only remnant that we have, very few notes and signatures, and everything disappeared. And like the night in John Keats' poem La Belle Dame sur Merci, we scholars have starved lips crying Molière thee are enthralled, palely loitering and searching for his manuscripts and holograph notes. Molière's paper vanished like a dream. It is a treasure hunt, so if you find some, tell me. I've been to Montpellier around, and all scholars are looking. You know, it's a treasure hunt to find documents with his signatures or document with the playwright's own handwriting. So this is one book by Molière that I found in Paris. It's an edition of 1725. And so we're always hoping to find some things. And there are things published at the end that you discover were never discovered about the phantom of Molière. So you could still find, but so many has been written on. But it's a treasure hunt, and so many are hoping, and I met so many who said, we discovered signatures in amazing places in the south of France, in small mayor's office. So we will see, maybe someday those papers will come back. So, but why is Molière, a 17th century French playwright, still inspiring Anglophone theater making in 2022? Why is Molière so extensively studied and staged in the United States and in Kansas City? Why is he translated, adapted, or as the American playwright David Ives coined his work on Molière, translation for him, obviously, is a combination of the word translation and adaptation. So he said that he thought that as a playwright, he should write as a playwright and not as a translator. So I will start by a quote by the Misanthrope, The School for Lies, by Ives, published in 2012 by the Northwestern University Press. And this is his transadaptation of Molière. Too bad for us, Molière left the plays in French, which no one speaks except, of course, the French. And pompous types who bandy terms like genre, is it a compliment or does it honor a great work to render it in our own tongue? So for George Steiner and After Babel, each language is an epiphany or articulated revelation of a specific historical and cultural message and landscape, obviously. And every human being performs an act of translation when receiving a speech message from any other human being. Time, distance, disparities in outlook make this act more or less difficult. Would you understand that accent or not? To speak is to translate. And Molière was the translator of the universality of vices and virtues. Because all the world is a stage and all men and women merely players, as Shakespeare said. And as you know, only 6 years. William Shakespeare died in 1616, only 6 years before Molière's death. Okay, so one great playwright was replaced by another. For me, Molière was the theater made into man. Remember, he was an actor, a poet, and a playwright. And to paraphrase T.S. Eliot, Molière's plays reflect not the experience of one life, but of many generations. Molière is, for me, the embodiment of theater. As you all know, or maybe theater comes from the ancient Greek, theater meaning the seeing place, a place where to observe, examine, contemplate, which implies a view or speculation. And it is linked to theoria. Theoria is based on the Greek theos, God, and therapy, okay, therapia. So can Molière's 17th century French theater become a healing and cathartic place? Can it become that type of theater? Like the well-cut diamond, the theatrical exploration of Molière has been satirical, comic, fantastic, absurd, mesmerizing, daunting, thought-provoking, and ever-changing, calling to the cathartic and mystical mindscape of the audience worldwide and throughout the world. The immortal voice of Molière is suffused with the beauty of harmony and intimacy. Molière speaks to every single one of us, to every single one of you from beyond the horizon. Molière's theater, to quote Antonin Artaud, is a theater which, without killing, induces the most mysterious changes in the minds of individuals and in a whole nation. Molière was a painter of vices and virtue, which have become organically active like renewed exorcism through translation. When we attend Molière's play, we stand for the kings and queen in Velázquez's painting Las Meninas. You see, he's looking at you. Okay? Is he painting you? No, he's painting the king and queen in the back mirror. So you are the king and queen. And this is the same when we attend Molière. We see ourselves. Okay? But Michel Foucault said it better than me. We are observing ourselves, being observed by the painter, and made visible to his eye by the same light that enables us to see him. But just as we are about to apprehend ourselves, transcribed by hand as though in a mirror at the back, we find that in fact we can apprehend nothing of that mirror, but its lustrous back, the other side of a psyche, okay, the king and queen. So now I want you to find Molière. This painting, this is in the Louvre. Yes, very good. Well done, yes. So Ingres, when he composed the theme of his painting, the Apotheosis of Homer for the Louvre ceiling, stated that he had placed Molière among Homer's children because no one for him was closer to the deep understanding of truth and human nature. So a close up, Molière there, you see, was, I hope you found him, it was there, okay. So Molière is looking at us just like Velázquez did, okay. He's the only one in the painting. You look at the other, their face are turned, whatever, but he's the one looking at you, okay, and saying, okay, I describe your vices and your virtue, but this is you are looking, okay, just like in Velázquez Las Meninas. So Molière is looking at us directly, like the painter Velázquez in Las Meninas, and this painting, Molière prevails over Racine. So for the painter, he was more important than Racine, because comedy was held in higher esteem by the painter. So just a quote in French, and then this is the only one. Si la France pouvait connaître votre prix, si le siècle rendait justice aux beaux esprits, en carrosse dorée vous iriez par les rues, on verrait le public vous dresser des statues. So indeed, statue of Molière will be erected in France for the celebration in the south of France and in Paris, and there are so many. And the actor of the Comédie Française paid for this one in Paris. This is in the gallery in the Comédie Française, and this is at the entrance of the Comédie Française. So already you see, sometimes in the play of Molière, he knew what was going to happen. It's proleptic, okay? Like when he said, die Molière on stage in one of his plays, and he will nearly die on stage, as you know. And here as well, he said, if you're so great, there'll be statue. And he was talking maybe to himself as a poet. So Molière's voice has become proleptic, as I said, and that may be one of the reasons why Molière is still inspiring Anglophone theater making 400 years after his birth. His surprising hermeneutic universality accounts for the fact that it has been translated, adapted countless times throughout the century, crossing linguistic and political border for 400 years, from Louis XIV to the French Revolution, the American War for Independence, the Romantic period, the Industrial Revolution, the 19th Easter Rising in Ireland, the Two World War, the May '68 movement, to this present day in Kansas City with Felicia's Landré translation of Molière play Les Fâcheux, The Past, or Philippe Bluehole-Hauser's original play Tartuffe en Trove, about the encounter of François Chouteau, the French father of Kansas City, and the Native American tribe, the Osage. Molière also has been a diplomatic tool for France, a peacemaker, a smart power for Charles de Gaulle. Molière survived through translation and opened a dialogue with his translator beyond the grave. And I love that quote. Borges has elegantly turned the whole notion of translation on its head, and he said, originals have a way of being unfaithful to their translators. Umberto Eco stated that work of art echo one another. Molière and his translator transcend time and space because they open a dialogue between their works. They echo one another, and the nature of the relationship is a kind of transtextual perfusion of new and old dramatic blood. Gérard Genette talked about a palimpsest. You know, palimpsest, it's a written document that have been written over and over again. So when you read something, you have the words of others before, okay? So for me, the present and the absent are in dialogue when you have translation of Molière. It's not there, but still is there in the words and in the translation. So to translate is to enter into a world of intimacy and privacy before the writer, because the writer and the translator, like the observer and the observed in Las Meninas, are taking part in a ceaseless exchange of permutation where hidden and unheard secrets are summoned. And as Steiner stated in After Babel, the existence of art and literature and the reality of felt history in a community depends on a never-ending, though very often unconscious, art of internal translation. It is no overstatement to say that we possess civilization because we have learned to translate out of time. Okay? Even our story, we've changed throughout our life, and it's out of time that we translate, and the memory changes. And it's the same with translation. So I think that the best translator of Molière are really searching for a stage language. It has to be funny, it has to be on stage, it's not something you're going to read. So the best translator are those who know what will happen on stage, obviously. They have the extremely important responsibility to have an ethic of connection. Even if they change things, there must be a connection with Molière. It has to be connected in some way. Even if they change the time, they change the costume, it has to be something that, that could bring them to a territory where we will find Molière. So Molière has been translated out of time so many times, so I won't be able to tell you all the translation, but I wanted to talk about the first one I found in English. This is the first complete translation. When Molière was alive, some of his plays were translated into English, stolen, and then brought to England or to Holland. But this is the first one that was ever translated in 1714. The second one is this one in 1732. And here, in a lot of them, some of them, they call him Molière, others de Molière. Okay, so it depends on the translator. And if he was present at court, where, etc. Then the third one dates back to 1739. And then you have the works of Molière, French and English in 10 volumes. So here you have both the translation, the translator and the translation. So sometimes you see a lot of mistakes, but you see how they translated at that time. Okay. The fourth dates back to 1875 and 76. And there have been copies of those throughout the world. Even when he was alive, there were translations, so many from the first one were Italian, obviously, with Commedia dell'arte. He was inspired by them, but as well they stole him, and they translated from a very early stage in his career. So we have a lot of translation in Italian that dates back to Molière's time. There have been many translations. A lot of them are unfortunately a bit useless because they are become ossified artifacts, you know, like in a museum where you have exhibit and nobody will explain, or you don't use them anymore, and they are lost, unfortunately. We've lost some of them. So the good translation are the one that allowed access into life-changing experience from different times and space. Some of them survived, some of them are still studied. But today, obviously, I will move and change century, and I will focus on 20th and 21st century translations of Molière's play in the Anglophone world, in Ireland, in Scotland, and in the United States, putting aside all the oldest translation and adaptation of Molière in Dutch, in Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and German, or the most recent one, the translation in Japanese, Chinese, Hebrew, Ukrainian, Estonian, to name but a few. It's been translated all over the world, but today we will focus, obviously, on the English one. But first, where was he born? So we don't know. We don't know the day, anyway. We know the place, but we don't know the day. We only know that he was baptized on the 15th of January, 1622. So that is why he's celebrated at the Comédie Française, and here we wanted to celebrate him on the 15th of January. But we know that it's something that is quite new. We only discovered that in thanks to Mr. Beffara, who was the former police commissioner of the Chaussée d'Antin in Paris at the time of the French who were working there at the time of the French Revolution. And in 1821, he published the baptismal record of Molière. Before, we didn't know. So before that date, nobody celebrated Moliere's birthday on the 15th of January, obviously. There are a lot of mistakes. It's lost. So we only have a copy of what he found. It disappeared again. I don't know, with Molière, it's so hard to find. So it disappeared. So we only have the copy that he made. And there are a lot of mistakes, spelling. So he says, on Saturday, Jean, son of Jean Poquelin, but it must be read Poquelin, but they made an error there, and Marie Cresset and Cresset, there's a mistake there again, was baptized. The family lived Rue Saint-Honoré. So if you go to Paris, you can go, but this is not the original, obviously. This is the one, and there were monkeys. So we call it le pavillon des singes, and this is where you have. This is what you can read, and this is a 3D of his real house where his father used to work, you know, tapestry, and the family would live above. And don't make the mistake to go there. This is the wrong address. This is his false address. Somebody wanted to make money. So he put that on his building and say, well, let's say that Molière was born here. Wrong address. So if you go and think about, may I have a, okay, this is not Israel. It was not born on the 31st of Pont-Neuf, not at all. And he died Rue Richelieu. This is the right, not the building he died in, but this is the place. So you could go. And you see that he was born a few blocks from where he died. You see? Very close. So this is where he was born. This is where he died. This is where the comedian from the Comédie Française built the statue. And all the theater, okay, where he was brought when he fell ill. And so very close to one another. What is incredible as well, this is in the Register of Lagrange, you know, where they had all the money, they share the money. Men and women will have the same salary, they would share, and this is where they would write. And this is the most touching. This is the day he died, so this is the letter to say Molière died today. And it is incredible because he died exactly 1 year after Madeleine Béjart, his first love. It's the exact same day. Okay, the 17th of February. So as you remember, no celebration before 1922, because we didn't know he was born on the 15th. So the Comédie Française started celebrating Molière on the 15th from 1722. On that day, they presented two plays by Dufresne, Le Mariage fait et rompu, and another from De Broglie, L'Avocat Patelin. For the bicentenary, in 1822, big celebration. The Misanthrope was performed on the 15th, and Tartuffe, Les Femmes Savantes, and there was even a new play entitled Le Ménage de Molière by Jean Soule and Naudet. But the biggest was the one in 1922. It was remarkable. Why? Because the Comédie Française, Department of Fine Arts, the Ministry of Public Instruction, and the Foreign Office all participated in the festival. Over 40 countries had been asked to send delegates. Delegate came from the United States, Great Britain, and even recent enemy from World War I, like Austria. There were also delegates from China, Japan, practically all the states from South America down to Paraguay and Venezuela, as well as smaller states like Estonia and Georgia. There was a reception at Molière's old school. And there was as well a decision from the general administrator of the Comédie Française, Émile Fabre. He wanted the 30 plays that have been performed in the 17th century from 1658 to 1673 to be staged. But too much money, so they reduced it to 25 plays. Already a very large amount of plays were staged. They chose fragment, so really the total of 23 plays were staged. The member of the Comédie Française all worked very hard for the 1922 celebration. There was an exhibition of Molière relics and pictures in the new library and archives of the Comédie Française in the Palais Royal. If you did research and you want to do research, there is this marvelous library in Paris that belongs to the Comédie Française in the Palais Royal, and this is when it was inaugurated. The French government gave money and bequeathed the Rondel collection of theatrical book to the Comédie Française. Then there was a conference at the Sorbonne, lectures on Molière. There was as well a throughout Europe exhibition and celebration in London, in America, obviously. And there was, for the first time, an amazing celebration of all the actors of the Comédie Française, everybody coming on stage, very emotional. But this is something you remember that started with in Beffara when he discovered the real date of his baptism and birth. So this time there was also all the actors present in Paris that did the same at the opera. So you had the Comédie Française as well and the opera. And in the opera, they all dressed up as doctors. And they read a line, and it was quite extraordinary. And so let's move on to the most emotional, the one you're living. Well, I don't know if we'll live another one. It will be a bit harder. So in Kansas City and throughout the world, university and theaters are paying tribute to the most stage-read and translated French dramatist in the world. We were extremely fortunate to have Jérôme Pouilly, who gave us this amazing one-man show, M. de Molière. I hope some of you were able to attend. So quite a very emotional, extraordinary moment in Kansas City. So obviously, Kansas City was going to be the first with Felicia, and we were going to have a cake, and I was going to give that conference on the 15th, but I was blocked in Paris and the COVID, so I went to the conference in Paris. There was one as well at the Sorbonne, and they wanted to be the first as well. So on the 6th of January, we had a conference, and this is a very emotional moment because this is the place where I successfully defended my PhD 20 years ago. So I already had Molière protecting me in the back, you know, so this is where I had, and we had the conference there, so very emotional. Then on the 15th, amazing moment. I waited for 8 hours to be there, but I was there, and the Comédie Française gave free tickets, and we could attend to the celebration, and there was a tartuffe, and all the comedians of the Comédie Française came on stage, and it was an amazing moment, a very, very emotional moment, and I was happy to wait 8 hours outside to have a ticket and to enter, so it was a wonderful moment. And then this is what the Comédie Française created for the 400 years. So there is a play, a pun, I hope you understand. Don't do it when you're afraid, but at the same time you're happy. They have done an enormous amount of plays as well, and new production as well. Creation, just like Jérôme Pouilly did here, and de Molière. They rewrote as well. They have plays, obviously, but in a new reading, and those are the ones I've seen so far. Amazing production. It was quite extraordinary. There will be a lot of things going on in America. You know, there is Yale University. There are going to be a lot. But if you come to Paris, it's until the 25th of July. So really, if you're able to go, everything, a lot are booked out, but sometimes if you wait 1 hour before, so maybe you can get, anyway, keep on reading and watching Molière wherever you are. It's extremely important. So let's move to Molière in America. So Molière is celebrated worldwide, but it is in the US that Molière received the most fervent admiration and enthusiasm. Enthusiasm from the Greek, that means, you remember, inspired by a god. Okay? Molière is not only studied in numerous universities and supported by the prestigious North American Society for 17th Century French Literature, but there are also an extraordinary amount of academic articles published on Molière in the United States. This is a very buoyant scholarly activity, and Professor Felicia Landry is the epitome of that buoyant scholarly activity here in Kansas City. She wrote more than 14 books on theater, over 60 scholarly articles, journals, publication, more than 100 books, and theater review, and I'm sure I'm forgetting. She received so many awards like the Inspirational UMKC Faculty Award. And when you are blessed to meet such a person, you can never be a misanthrope. You must love human beings. You can only love human beings when you're fortunate to meet such an amazing lady. Thank you, Felicia, again. So in America, I think that Molière is not only understood as a playwright, but as well as an actor. I think that some of the best translation of Molière's work comes from American academics like Curtis Hayden Page, professor at Harvard, who translated Molière's work at the beginning of the 20th century, or from the American poet Richard Wilburn in 1955, or Donald Frame, professor at Columbia, Robert Cohen's rhyming translation of The Misanthrope at the University of California, or David Ives' new recent translation of The Misanthrope, The School for Lies. As well as, obviously, Professor Felicia Laundrie's translation of Les Fâcheux, The Past. So Molière is not only translated and adapted, but also staged and understood, both as an actor and a playwright in the US, because of his modernity, his Pirandellian capacity to unveil truth and lies, make believe and reality, to conjure up a satirical mirror of humanity. David Ives composed his play in verse. Lines are in regular pentameters, sometimes with feminine ending, and I wanted to give you an example of that. Monsieur Molière, unfortunately dead, sends fond regret from his eternal bed. For it is he, with an immortal play, mixed the batter for tonight's soufflé. In 1666, his entertainment titled The Misanthrope, a dark arrangement of human life and love and hope, blah, blah, and funny too, and I mean funny, ha ha. Okay, so this is a vision of Molière's work. So Molière is timeless because his theater both entertains and edifies the audience. And to paraphrase Jonathan Swift, his theater, like satire, is a sort of glass wherein beholders do generally discover everybody's face but their own, obviously. So Molière lives through translation, adaptation, reinventation worldwide. Molière's theater, by crossing linguistic borders, is not disfigured, but transfigured. As Gilles Deleuze stated in 1972 in Différence et Répétition, the repetition is the universality of the singular. And it does echo the motto of the Comédie Française, simul et singulis, to be together, but to be yourself. Molière was translated in the US, but has been performed in French with players from the Comédie Française, touring America, starting with Rachel, in 1855. She was the first touring America. Then we had Sarah Bernard, who came 5 times to Kansas City and toured America for so many. And we have Jérôme Pouly. We are blessed to have him, and he's here, so thank you so much. But between Sarah Bernard and Jérôme Pouly, we had some coming. So those were the plays that toured America over the years with the comedians of the Comédie Française coming together, not on their own, as did Jérôme Pouly and Sarah Bernard. They came with quite a number of them. But the fact that French actors from the Comédie Française from 1855 onward toured the United States and played in French, as Jérôme Pouly did with his one-man show M de Molière here in Kansas City, exemplify the amazing interest of the American people in Molière's plays. Let me give you some other amazing example of the triumphs received by comedians from the Comédie Française, apart from Jérôme Pouly, obviously. So, for example, in 1961, 3,200 seats were sold in New York for Molière's play, Les Fourberies des Scapins, L'Impromptu de Versailles, Tartuffe, were performed in French in New York. Famous actors came to attend the performance, like Laurence Olivier, Claudette Colbert, Anthony Quinn, and Broadway actors. They wanted to see how the French played. The spectator had to wear earphones to listen to the translation. But most of the spectators after a while removed the earphone to listen to the rhythmic pattern of the language of Molière. And the First Lady of the United States, Jacqueline Kennedy, attended as well. It was her first official night out after the election of her husband, JFK. Okay? There had been, at that time, a fire in the French embassy, so a reception was organized for the comedian of the Comédie Française at Blair House, the president's guest house in Washington. So an essential topos for, obviously, American diplomacy. So they were really well received. Another example is the amazing success of Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme with Louis Seigné in Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. What makes Molière still so important and so modern in America, and the source of theatrical activity, not only thanks to the translation or rewriting, but also through the French adaptation and production, is that both the logos and the topos are witty enough to shed light on human voices and virtue even today, and they're still meaningful for all of us. So not only in the US was Molière so important, but as well in throughout history, and we're going to move to Ireland, and we'll see how Molière was so important and in Ireland in the creation of our new state. So the theater is the place where a nation thinks in public in front of itself. Okay? This quote is absolutely relevant when we think of Molière in Ireland. The birth of the National Theatre in Ireland, the Abbey Theatre in 1904, is intertwined with the political and national theatre in Ireland. It created a nation, okay? Why? When the Easter Rising started on Monday, the 24th of April, 1916, some bystanders in the street of Dublin believed they were witnessing the opening of a play, because there were so many actors, rebels, fighting for the independence of Ireland, that they saw that it was that the proclamation of independence was a play. Oh, what are they playing? No, it's a revolution. Okay? So there were numerous members of staff of the Abbey, as well as poets and playwrights, men and women in the ranks of the rebels in the street of Dublin. They participated actively. They had guns in the Abbey Theatre. They helped the wounded. Even one of them, Sean Connolly, was killed on the barricades fighting. You had women as well, erased by history, but now they're coming back, and we're seeing what they did. And they were actresses at the Abbey Theatre or usher. And a lot of them entered the fight because they went to the theatre. Okay? So one of them said, "It was the play at the Abbey Theatre that made me increasingly aware that I was an Irishman." Women were of paramount importance in the rising, like Elena Maloney, Ellen Botchell, who worked as actress in the Abbey Theatre. And they were obviously a part of the action. And I wanted to focus, obviously, on one of those women, the playwright Lady Gregory. So she was working with William Butler Yeats, okay? And as a scholar of Irish and French theatre, I want to pay tribute to Nicholas Green, Christopher Murray, Anthony Roach, Jacqueline Genet, and Georges Forestier for their research and the work that have been carried out. I work in the library of the Sorbonne, in the archive of the Comédie Française, in the Palais Royal, in the archive of the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, as well as in the National Library of Ireland, in the manuscript room in Kildare Street. For this presentation, so I want to thank Merit Maloney and Agathe Saint-Jean for their help there. So Irish playwrights were influenced by Molière from a very early stage, from Sheridan to Lady Gregory and Yeats to Derek Mahon and the Field Day Project. Lady Gregory, in 1906, decided to translate some of Molière's play into the Kilcartan dialect. It was more than a mere translation, it was a political statement, a way of constructing a national identity. For William Butler Yeats, in a note for the Abbey Theatre, he said that the word translation, which should be applied to scenery, acting, and words alike, imply or should imply freedom. In vital translation, and I believe that all translations are vital, a work of art does not go well upon its travel. It is reborn in a strange land. So Molière was reborn in a strange land, translated into Hiberno English, and a special Hiberno English, the Kilcartan, which is talked in the west of Ireland. So it was really emotional because in the archive I found the handwriting of Lady Gregory and her translation of Le Médecin Malgré Lui, the doctor in spite of herself. So this is her handwriting and her translation there. So Lady Gregory translated before the Easter Rising, Le Médecin Malgré Lui, the doctor in spite of himself. Then Les Fourberies de Scapin, the roguery of Scapin in 1908, and The Miser in 1909. Those three plays were produced at the Abbey Theatre between 1906, before the Revolution, and 1909, and published in 1911 in a volume called The Kilcartan Moliere in Dublin and in Boston. Because she raised funds, she came to America, she had money, and so we have it as well published in Boston. After the Easter Rising, Lady Gregory translated Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, the Wool-Be Gentleman, in 1926. So Lady Gregory acknowledged in our Irish theatre that there are close connections between Molière and Irish theatre as far as theme, subject matters, and staging are concerned. A theatre, as we conceived it, could contain in its repertory plays from the principal dramatic school. We have begun with 3 plays by Molière because we think that we are closer to France. Lady Gregory translation are shaped by the Abbey player and the Irish, are shaped for and the Abbey players and the Irish audience. And obviously they did it for the audience, but at that time they wanted the advice of the French, of the actors from the Comédie Française. So Yates entered in contact with actors and asked them to come to Dublin and give them advice. How do you play at the Comédie Française Molière? So they came and they helped them stage those 3 plays. So I found in a note Yates saying, the movement, business, as unlike the words, are as true of one nationality as another, are sent to us by the Comédie Française. So it was in the program saying, the play you're going to see, okay, we wrote it in Irish, but we had the French, we had the Comédie Française coming and showing us how do you play Molière, okay? So for Michael Cronin and translating Ireland, when Lady Gregory decided to translate Molière into Kilcartan, it was an act of cultural self-confidence. It implies that Hiberno English was a fit vehicle for one of the greatest playwrights of the world. Okay? It proved that if you could translate Molière, then our tongue is worse, and in our country we can fight for our freedom. So translating Molière in Ireland from 1906 to 1926 was, apart from a prestige-oriented choice for the National Theatre, a political statement. The 4 plays translated all promoted the emancipation of the younger generation from the unfair tyranny of father. You know where I'm getting at. Obviously, connecting it with the colonial power of the British. Okay, connection there, the younger, the older, Ireland, the UK. So the creation of the Irish national nation is based on the mythical character of Kathleen Ní Houlihan. You remember, this is the play by Yeats. So you have an old lady, and then she's transformed into a beautiful woman, and it's a terrible beauty is born. And obviously, we're talking about Ireland. We're talking a terrible because people died and lost their life, because Ireland is considered as a woman, and men will be ready to die for her. So a terrible woman is born, and at the same time, it connects the birth of the Irish nation to Molière and to the theatre. Okay, so we will skip that. In Lady Gregory translation of Le Médecin Malgré Lui, the doctor in spite of himself, Lucinde, called Lucy, is like Sarah in Brian Field's play translation, who has lost her speech. Irish, as you all know, is a ghost language. It has been erased by colonization. Okay, it has been murdered and lost. And so the character there is unable to speak, so she epitomizes, she is the embodiment of Ireland, and she is lapsing into an irretrievable silence. and she's not able to find a way in the world because she has lost her language. And when you lose your language, all the places you've been to are translated. The place you used to call Dondok is called another name. So you're lost in your own country because you've been translated. Okay? Geographical translation is the fact that she's lost to herself and to her country. So she may choose silence to destroy her enemy. She's the stolen fire of Prometheus, or even Prometheus himself refusing to answer. For Steiner, in Molière, where power relation determine the condition of meeting, linguistic exchange becomes a duel. Lucy, the woman oppressed by her father, Géronte, knows that in that linguistic duel, she may win by refusing the language of the father. So she's rejecting the language of the father. Lady Gregory celebrated this act of linguistic resistance and by translating Molière in Hiberno English, and therefore proves that Ireland has not lost her speech entirely. Gaelic may have been erased, but it remains a ghost language pervading Hiberno English. Lucy embodies Lady Gregory's ideals for Ireland, the island of saints and scholars. This ideal is the emancipation of its people through culture. Translating Molière into Hiberno English was for Lady Gregory and the Abbey Theatre a way to defy the British Empire, or as the scholar Michael Cronin stated, of allowing the target language, the language of the colonizer, to be colonized in its turn by the language of the colonized. So another very important moment for Molière in Ireland is the Field Day. Field Day was created by Brian Friel. I was extremely lucky to meet him and all the group. And they saw that, well, we have trouble in Ireland, people killing each other for geographical issues or religion. Let's meet as intellectual writers and let's build the fifth province of the imagination. Whatever your religion, you're an artist, we're going to find a way to have peace and to create. And this is what they created. And they called it Field Day. And they said, what best way to unite Ireland than to translate Molière? Okay, so we have the trouble, the bomb, the terrorist attack in Belfast, in Derry. And what did they choose to do? Let's tour Ireland and have play translating Molière. Okay, let's change and bring peace and bring theater to people who are in small villages who are not able to attend Molière. Let's go and show them. So Brian Friel asked one of them, who was educated at the Sorbonne, the only one who could work from Molière, from the French, and translate it into Hiberno English. So this is Derek Mahon. And following Brian Friel's advice, he started translating 2 of Molière's plays. And Derek Mahon, unfortunately, passed away during the pandemic in 2022. He was born in Belfast in 1941 and studied at Trinity College and then moved to the Sorbonne. He's been to America as well. He received so many awards for the C.K. Scott Moncrief Translation Prize, the Lemon and Guggenheim Fellowship. And during the pandemic, this poem helped a lot of people in Ireland. And helped me as well, so I'm going to read 2 or 3 lines because when I was planning to come here and everything was stopped, I read those lines and they gave me strength. And so it says, and the sun rises in spite of everything. And the far cities are beautiful and bright. And I thought, and Kansas City is beautiful and bright. And one day I'm going to be here. And one day the pandemic will be over. And he said, and I lie here in a riot of sunlight, watching the daybreak and the clouds flying. Everything is going to be all right. As such, Field Day, with Derek Mahon and Brian Friel and Stephen Ray and Seamus Heaney, is the 5th province of the imagination. It is a mythical topos which exists to transcend all Irish division. Would it be geographical, north and south, religious, Catholic, Protestant, cultural and political? Translation and adaptation becomes for Field Day a struggle that enables an audience to acquire an identity through Hiberno English. As Seamus Dean said, the recovery from the lost Irish has taken the form of an almost vengeful virtuosity of the English language. Okay, you stole our language, but we're going to speak it so well that we're going to be better. So Nobel Prize for Literature, all those plays will receive an award that will go on Broadway and West End Okay, this is, if it's so good, it will travel. Molière, translated in Hiberno English, will be staged throughout the world. So in this effort, they started translating the School for Husband, l'École des Maris, that was translated into High Time, nothing to do with... then it was followed by the School for Wife in the Dublin Theatre Festival in 1986. And Derek Mahon recalled that l'École des Maris, 1661, was the most frequently performed of Moliere's play during the Revolution, the French Revolution. So he thought, well, what time could I use? Let's use May 68 in Paris. So you have High Time, l'École des Maris, May 68 in France. So on the street of Paris, and with the police wearing riot gear. So he added that he liked the idea of 68 with its background of student revolt and educational reform, the more so much because those events had astonishing effect in Ireland, not only in America, throughout the world, but as well in Derry and Belfast. This show that for Derek and Field Day, Molière was talking beyond the grave to the Irish. Molière was really talking to them, and that play made sense at that time. His voice was heard during the Trouble in Northern Ireland, and as William Butler Yeats, one of our greatest poets, said, gaiety was transfigured and transfigured all that dread. Derek Mahon dug into Moliere's life and thought that l'École des Maris was for Molière only a sketch, really, for l'École des Femmes. He saw that in the 17th century, the more substantial play, l'École des Femmes, provoked the anger of the conservative, and he said, let's translate that one as well. But this time, he chose the Grand Siècle. He chose to do it in the time of Stendhal, Georges Sand, and Saint-Simon. So the action takes place in Avignon. And for him, he thought, well, Provence is an amazing place to have Molière. And so we can use that with Arnulf, thinking that he belongs to the haute bourgeoisie, and so goes to Paris as the hub of the universe. That's where Oronte lives, where auras come from. So for Mahon, he said, to someone like Arnulf, the capital, Paris, is both inspiring and rather dangerous, representing the sophistication inner yearns for and the revolutionary activity which threatens his social equilibrium. So Mahon's version of a 17th century play set in the 19th century for a 21st century audience embraced was what I love, what Borges called the vulgar pleasure of anachronism. So the School for Husband start with this. Except for Isabel, the young people wear punk gear. Baroque music changes to rock and roll. Music fade, morning, Archie in low, loud church and Bermuda shorts sits on a bench. His brother Jack, in a dark suit, paces up and down. So he changed the name of the characters, apart from Isabel, as I told you. And Scanner is called Jack. Ariste is called Archie. Mahon used an Hiberno English vocabulary. Let me give you an example of that. Archie, despite what they say, Jack, people, a bunch of Egypt like yourself. Archie, thank you very much, indeed. I'm glad now to set my mind at rest. Just what is this my critics so detest? And in the School for Wife, you have fewer Irish idioms. So let me quote in French, and then you'll have the translation. Épouser une sotte et pour n'être point sot, je crois en bon chrétien votre moitié fort sage, et c'est assez pour elle à vous en bien parler de savoir prier Dieu, m'aimer et coudre et filer. Arnulf in English now. No doubt your wife is a decent girl at heart. By marrying clever, isn't that what I call smart? There's only 4 things I would rather her do. Love God and me, and learn to knit and sew. So what Field Day directors and Derek Mahon mean with the adaptation of Moliere's play is touching a specific audience by using a particular way of expressing one's identity. And for Brian Friel, the decolonization of the imagination is very important if a new Irish personality is to emerge. The adaptation of Moliere's work can be seen as a bridging of cultural and temporal gaps, not only in Ireland, but as well in Scotland. For the playwright Noel Peacock, there are clear evidence of Scottish interest in Molière from a very early start. You had a lot of publishers in Scotland from the 1751 onwards. In the 19th century, Molière continued to attract Scottish publishers. His work was also featured in school. During World War II, Molière was chosen by the Fighting Free French Coordinating Committee and the British Council as a symbol of solidarity between France and Britain. The Citizen Theatre Bulletin, the prompter, records a lecture on Molière on the 14th of June 1944. There is also an evidence of a Cercle Molière meeting in Scotland during the war. And at the same period, Charlotte Delbo, I don't know if you heard about her, Charlotte Delbo, Louis Jouvet, he was a comedian from the Comédie Française. She was Louis Jouvet's collaborator, was arrested with her husband during the Second World War because they joined the resistance. So both of them were arrested. George, her husband, was shot dead, and she was deported. She arrived, and she said one morning in January 1943, we arrived. It was a place before geography. Where were we? We were to learn later, at least 2 months later, that the place was called Auschwitz. To survive in that hellish place, they thought about theater. They thought about Molière. And Molière lines helped them survive. Each and every one of them will remember one quote by Molière, and little by little, they were able to have a patchwork of all the lines of Le Malade Imaginaire. So a line was often a victory of the day. She said it was magnificent because a few of Molière's lines resurfaced intact from our memory, lived again, charged with their magical and incredible power. It was magnificent because each one, with humility, played their part in the performance without thinking of showing off. A miracle of actors without vanity. It was a miracle of the audience that suddenly found childhood and purity. It was magnificent because for 2 hours, without the chimney having stopped smoking their smoke of human flesh, for 2 hours we believed in it. We believed in it more than we believed in our only belief at the time, freedom. It may be incredible that in such circumstances, confronted with the most radical inhumanity, women prisoners were able to smile thanks to Molière. They survived, said Charlotte Delbo and her friend, and this was their ultimate sabotage against the Nazi camp. Theater, Molière, and irony participated in that rebellion. After the war in 1945, in their first visit to Scotland, the Comédie Française went to Scotland. They really impressed Edinburgh and Glasgow. Louis Jouvet, the one who worked obviously with Charlotte Delbo, made a memorable contribution with his version of L'École des Femmes. And it was a production that inspired so many writers and playwrights in Scotland. They saw that in French and they were, wow, let's do it. So there was Robert Kemp who did an adaptation. Other production went, and Jean Villard went to Scotland as well. Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme with Louis Seigné as well was extremely successful. And in the post-war period, performance of Molière in Scotland was extremely important in university. They were creating their university and it bonded the student to have Molière. They were looking for excellent drama society and they used Molière. And another factor in the increase of Molière production, obviously in the post-war period, is the interest in a national identity as well. Okay, so by using Molière, they would find their own voice as well. A lot of them criticized and said, no, it's not possible to translate Molière in Scottish. Okay, maybe Irish, but Scottish, it's impossible. And yet, we see that they were wrong, and we had amazing translation, and this one was extremely successful, Les Lockhead Tartuffe, which drew universal admiration. So to conclude, eager to be understood and precise echoing subject is each generation in translating Molière uses language to build a past, where the human predicament can be felt, where vices and virtues are openly displayed. Theatre can only survive through internal translation and by crossing external linguistic borders. This presentation on translation and adaptation of Brian's play in the Anglophone world echo Nietzsche's tradition to the theatre as an imitation. For him, every artist is an imitator, either an Apolline dream artist or a Dionysian ecstatic artist, or else, as for example in Greek tragedy, a dream artist and an ecstatic artist at one and the same time. Writing, rewriting, and adapting have a mythical quality, obviously, because the myth is a way to communicate a message. Moliere's message 400 years after his birth is a dive into the cryptic region of the inner thought, where truth is language, where music and dance are intertwined in the fabric of comedy. It binds the past and the present together. It reverberates in the works and carries away the audience in the discovery of a shared emotional experience, because it addresses us all as social beings. Beyond translation, imitation, transformation, Moliere's voice is the true gift of theatre, the real benediction of timeless art. It is a French 17th century bells ringing and reverberating quietly and persistently in the head of the audience when the curtain has gone down and the audience come home. Molière theatre transcends time and space because it has the echoing quality of universality. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Virginie. We have time for maybe one or two questions. We have microphones here at the front if anybody does have one.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
But I don't really speak French. Anyway, my question is, or kind of like a two-part question. So Shakespeare, which is of course in English-speaking country, one of the greatest playwrights. When children today, or in our colleges and high schools, reading Shakespeare in Old English is, so give me a sense of the original writings of Molière. Is it kind of similar that it's an Old French, it's similar to Old English as Shakespeare? And the other thing is, but we also here in this country do, all around the country, there's Shakespeare in the Park in the summer times. Do you do like Molière in the original Old French, let's say? Is that still alive today?
Thank you so much for your question. Yeah, absolutely. 6 years you've seen, so at the same time. So obviously it's Old French for younger, but in our school, we study Molière. Every single of our kids will study Molière once in their life. So this is something we have to study, and this is part of our DNA. From a very young age, we would see a movie as well. We would go to the theater. French teacher do an amazing job, and Molière is staged and played in numerous schools all over the country. This is what we call language of Molière, so they have to study, but as you said, it's extremely difficult. And Jérôme Pouly would say it as well as an actor. The way to talk and to play Molière is extremely hard. I quoted a few lines, but I'm not able to play as he did. When you learn, it's extremely hard, it's extremely powerful, it's beautiful, but it's still, sometimes it has to be worked on and studied because the word has changed. We translate out of time. So as a French teacher, you have to explain to your student, this word is not used anymore, but that was the meaning. So just like you with Shakespeare. So it's a buoyant activity, and unfortunately at the moment in the UK they don't have Molière celebration. It's a bit sad. But you have more here, so thank you in America. But with the Brexit, I don't know. But they have Molière now, but they used to, as I told you, 1922, we had Molière in the UK. And The director of the Abbey Theatre gave me it as a confidence. Don't say it, but I'm going to say it. They're going to have a play translated of Moliere this year to celebrate. So they're going to do something and translate Moliere by one of the famous playwrights. So in Ireland, there'll be something for the celebration. But you're the first. Americans are the greatest for the celebration, the 400 years. And so thank you. Thank you all for your interest in Moliere. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. It seems like Moliere was the first person to roast anybody and everybody. And I was wondering, where did he get his money and support and stuff? Because it seems like he was always picking on royalty, and it works in all countries, so I was just wondering.
You remember I told you his father was working with tapestry, so they were close. They were serving the king, and it helped him approach the king. And as well, he went to the Hôtel de Clermont, the high school, and there he met famous people from the gentry. So from a very young school, the equivalent to a high school, there he met Cyrano de Bergerac, and he made so many princes close to the king. So he made connection. And the first love of his life, Madeleine Béjart, had as well contact and money, and she helped him a lot. So when he entered and l'Illustrateur, when they worked together already, as I told you, men and women had the same money, and she shared, and they all shared. So they had money together, and they built. They lost a lot of money with the first one, so his father gave him money. Okay, so he was helped by his father, and then through meetings and people he met, you know, destiny, fate, he moved, and he learned, and he wrote, and he had such a short life, 52 years, because he was an actor, he was a playwright and a poet, and he would never stop being an actor. And you know that at that time you could not be buried in a churchyard if you were an actor. So he died, and he did not have time to say, no, I don't want to be an actor, and then he could be buried. So it was not, until the end, he worked extremely hard. So even if you said, yes, maybe he had royalty, he had hell, but he worked really hard his whole life for his passion. Well, maybe when you have a passion, you never work, but he worked extremely hard, and he was extremely gifted, and maybe he met the right person at the right moment. You know, sometimes you have a gift, but you don't encounter the good person, but his life was like that, you know. When the king discovered him, the person that discovered him lost everything, his castle and money, because the king said, oh, he has more than me, so I'm going to take it. And then he took the Molière with him. So it's a history, it's quite extraordinary. And what is incredible, what you're saying, that Molière is used even during Louis XIV, but as well at the Revolution. They wouldn't say, oh, he was with the rich. No, Molière is ours as well, in times of revolution as well. People would say, okay, he's fighting against those who have power as well. So it was reinterpreted in every century. You had Molière on stage, and the French being proud of that. And as you've seen all around the world as well, it was used and translated.
Okay,
Thank you for your question, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I think you all would agree with me. This was worth the 4-month wait.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Virginie.
Thank you.